everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. Welcome to the second episode of JavaScript development. So in our previous episode, we talked about what JavaScript is all about. We looked at if and else, switch statement, a little bit about functions as well. We play around with arrays using for loops, right? And we looked at while loop as well, right? And a little bit about adding a property on the fly and method on the fly as well, right? So today, what we're going to do, we're going to look a little more deeper into functions. We're going to look into objects. We look at the getters and setters, right? And then we're going to also look at inheritance and prototype chain, right? That's pretty much what we're going to talk about, right? We're not going to talk about classes, but classes is a bit interesting. If you are someone who came from Apex or Java or C#, you will find a bit different the classes here. Class is not really exactly what you've been used to. So in JavaScript, it's a bit different. So that's the topic for next episode, right? So let's dive in. So the last time we talked about functions, right? The way to write a functions, right? So you have let's say where method equals to function right, function A, right, B, and so we have something called return A plus B, right? And the way to excuse me, and the way to call this one is console.log, and you can do method, and please make sure it's about the cases, right? Because it's a case sensitive language. And so you're gonna get 4, right? If you haven't watched my previous episode, I will highly encourage you to check that out before you watch today's one, because it's a continuation of the previous one, right? Cool. Okay, so this is what we did, something similar, right? So you can also use function inside function. So what I mean by that is, let's say I do something similar like this function, say function C, and then we're gonna look at return A plus B plus C, right? Okay, now this will work, right? But what happens, just see what happens when you run the same code, right? You'll not get anything, right? You'll get because this one will only return just function, pretty much. It's not doing anything, right? So now how do we evaluate this function, right? It's just pretty straightforward. So you need to add one more bracket, something like this, and then you need to pass the value of C, that is just say 4. So you should get 8 as an answer, right? This is one of the very handy feature. You can use it for a different scenario based on your business requirement. So you can extend it, right? And even you can also do return function D. You can also do return A plus B plus C plus D. Right? Okay. And now let's see what happens. Right, it's returning function because you're saying, okay, give me till this, but it's returning function, right? So you can do this. So you can go nested functions, right? It's pretty cool feature, right? So you see, this is one of the thing. Keep in consideration, right? It might come handy somewhere, right? Okay, so we're gonna talk about more about the functions. Okay, let me do one more stuff with the functions, right? So let's say where test equals to function a function, let's say let's say we are not assigning to anybody, right? Just keep the function as such. Function person, right? And let's say name age, right? Okay, and then we do this dot name equals to name. This dot age equals to age, right? Okay, just keep this. Right. Okay, save it. Now watch this. Dave. Okay, you can just person one, new, person, Dave, 25, right? Okay, where person two equal to new, person, Pete, let's say 30. Okay, right. Now let's I'll explain to you what I'm doing. So let me type this first. So console.log. This is one of the reasons why I like using Visual Studio Code, right? I'm a kind of person who get confused with the cases, right? Because I work with Apex at times. I work with C#. C# is a case-sensitive language, and Apex is case-insensitive. Back in the days, I used to work with Delphi. Delphi it's amazing language, right? So I worked in Delphi for many years, so I didn't have to worry about the cases. But I remember my boss used to get annoyed with the case mixing up. He said, you need to be consistent. Either you use uppercase or lowercase. Don't mix up the cases, right? So, yeah, so I often, so that's one of the reasons why I like IntelliSense autocomplete feature. It's actually autocompletes the stuff. Mind you, that Delphi editor, which I worked on, has pretty good autocomplete. Even C# has it, right? So even Apex has it. So if you're using Dev Console, right? So the reason why I mentioned Apex, because this tutorial is mostly for a Salesforce developer, but if you're not Salesforce developer, it's gonna help you as well. All right, okay. So enough. Sorry, I digress. So just not to tell one story while I'm typing. So okay, all right. So right, see. So what I did here, right? So I've created a function, right? And then I created a new object. Now, let's see, I'm going to show you something here. So now you might think, okay, this is a new person and this is person two. Person two, person one, person two, same information, right? So you must be thinking they're pretty much similar, right? Now that's where the problem comes in, right? So let's check if person one equals to person two, okay, then say console.log. Oh, come on. So I'll just put equal, right? Else, right? Console.log not equal. Right. So what I've done, I've created two separate instances to created two different objects using new. When you do new of because function arrays, they are objects, right, in JavaScript, as I mentioned to you in my last episode. So when you do new person, right, it's creating a new object, right? Just to give you a demonstration, like you might think the person one and person two are equal, right, because they are doing pretty much the same, right? But it's not the case. So okay, let's see what's going on here. Right, they're not equal because they're different objects, so they have different memory locations. So they're different objects. So this is one of the things, just pay attention to it. So if you're doing something like person and like a function, function is an object, and you can use it as you can create a different object out of it, right? So yeah, that's one of the things, just pay attention to it. And this is where the concept of inheritance and prototype chaining comes into picture. I'm going to explain to you at the end of the tutorial. So for now, I just wanted to demonstrate what all you can do with the functions, right? First, we talk about nested functions, right? You can go deep into it. And then we can talk about something like how to create different objects using new, right? This is one of the very cool feature. You can do that, right? Okay, now what we're going to do, we're going to talk about objects, and then we're going to talk about setters and getters, right? So let's talk about an object here. let's say I have an object. Let's call it as a person, right? Because object is too technical, right? Anyway, we are doing tech stuff, but still, I mean, just to have, it's good to have meaningful naming convention. So let's say name. I'm just gonna put it as Dave, right? I'm just gonna say we're gonna do say age. And just put, let's put 30, right? And now here's the magic here. So I wanted to access the name, right? So getters and setters are used for data quality, so it's very handy. And so the way to do getter, right? I want to get information about the name. You can do that. You can do get, right? And just say get name, right? And so we're gonna do just say return this dot name, right? Okay, now save it. Control S if you're wondering. So now let's access this get name to get getters and setters, right? It's properties. If you're from a different programming language, right? So getters and setters are very commonly used. So that's one of the similar concept we have here as well. So so what we're gonna do? So we're gonna do access this name using get name instead of accessing name directly, right? So what we're gonna do? So we're gonna do console.log, and then we do person dot get name, right? And right. So this is what we're gonna do, and right. Sorry. Right. That's right. It's not a function. Right. That's right. My apologies. Okay. So. Okay. Right. Date. Right. So fantastic. Now, you can also do get for. You can also do get for age as well. And get age. Right, and so return the start excuse me age, right? And then you can do console dot log person dot age, right? And so this is one of the thing. Okay, CLS, and not age, sorry. There you are. So you can use the getter to get the information of of this field name. Right now we're going to talk about the setter. Let's say you have something called phone number, right? Phone here, and I'm just gonna mark it blank here, for instance, right? And sorry, here, and then what we're gonna do, we're gonna set this using so we're gonna do set phone okay, set okay, put a comma here. So we're gonna do set phone. Oh, come on. I just say ph, right? You can give a meaningful name. This dot phone equals to ph, right? So sounds nice and easy, right? So now we're gonna do person dot come on, not this one. Sometimes you have to be careful with intelligence. It just prints random stuff, right? Okay, so set phone. Come on. Okay, seems like it doesn't seem to like me today. Okay, all right, intelligent. Okay, all right. So what we're gonna do? Just put blah blah blah, whatever. Okay, and at the same time, we need one more getter here. So get get phone. I mean, I like to do this stuff in a very optimized way. You know, if you are a programmer, you need to keep into consideration to write efficient code, right? Not for the sake of just writing code. I know at times we got project deadlines and other stuff. It happens, right? It happens in my career as well. Sometimes I got hooked into so much of work at the time that you realize, oh, it's getting crazy at time, right? And then the code quality kind of goes out of the window, but that's not really a good practice. I mean, if you can find a balance, right? I mean, that would be great. I'm not judging anyone, right? I mean, I've been through this stage, so I know what exactly I'm talking about. So if you come across this, it's good to have a bit of balance, right? Okay, cool. So I put the person.setName here, right? So I'm actually using a setter property to assign the value. So I did that here, right? And then because okay, so this one is, so I have actually kept the phone number as blank just to demonstrate what happens. So, okay, so what we're gonna have, oh man, what's happened here? Okay. Right. Now this got exciting, right? So now, oh, okay. There you are. Sorry about that. Okay, so what happened was, right, so I was trying to use it as a method, so which is not the case. You can't use it as a method, right? Sorry, bad habits, right? Because I mean, right, okay. So what I did was that I used getter and setter, right? So getter and setter are better way to ensure the data quality, right? So as you can see that I've been deliberately trying to do mistake just to demonstrate what I'm doing, right? If you try to do fiddle around with it in a different way, it won't let you do that, right? So now what happens is, right? So let's see, let me tell you one thing. You can also use this, right? But it's always better to use, right? I mean, I often prefer to use the getter and setter if I have to access the field. It's a good programming practice. So this is one of the functionality JavaScript support, right? So if you wanted to know more about it, efficient usage, do read about. There's a Mozilla documentation. There's a good JavaScript MSDN documentation about it. So just I'll put a link below for your interest, right? So this is one way you can do getters and setters, right? So instead of using person.h, it's better to use the getter, right? And if you wanted to assign something, it's better to use the setter here, right? So this is one of the thing you can do, right? And so if you wanted to use this one, so you can do get phone, right? So please make sure this is not a method, right? Because it seems like a method, but it's not a method, right? So I talked about adding a method in an object. I'm going to do that again just to give you information how the method looks like, right? So what we're going to do, so we're going to do person, so I wanted to show you about some cool stuff here, right? So we're gonna do say header, so we're gonna do header, and gonna do, so we gonna do header as, we're gonna do array, so we're gonna do array of two. I'm gonna explain to you what I'm doing. Let me finish it first. So ID, just gonna put 1, ID, put 2, right? And we're gonna do data list, right? I'm also gonna put name, Dave. Oh, sorry, not date. Age 25. Name Dave. Oh, sorry. Pete. Age. Just gonna do 30. Right. Okay. Right. So what I've done, right? So I've created an object. So okay, let me do one more thing. Method. Method. Function. ID. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just gonna put. Okay. ID. Header. Method. ID. Return. This dot header. Right. Okay, so we're going to ID dot. I'm just going to put name. I'm just going to put ID, right? Okay. Child list. Okay, so I'm just going to put right and function ID. Okay, return this dot data list. Right. Okay. So. Right. Okay. Right. Let me. Right. So what I've done, right? So I've created an object, right? So with two fields, which is an array, right? So which contains object, right? You can have you can use array of an object. You can use an object array inside an object. You can do pretty much a lot of stuff, right? So what I've done, I've created a person with two fields of array type, which is an array of an object. First, a header is an array of an ID, and the second one is an array of a data list, right? So just to give it should be index, right? So this should be index. Okay, index, and right. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is that I created a function method, right? And I'm trying to access using the header method, the header using an index, right? I'm not doing any error check whether what happens if you know if index out of bounds. I'm not worrying about it. I just wanted to demonstrate you the concept, right? So and I'm trying to access the child using an index as well, right? So I wanted to access name or first name, second name, whatever, right? You can use using index, all right? That's pretty much the concept, right? So I repeat again. So I created an object, right? And I've added two fields, which are an array of an object, right? So header includes an array of headers, and data list includes array of names, right? So person, contact, right? Name and age, person information, right? Excluding the contact, right? Okay, so let's see console.log, how to access it, right? Person dot header method, right? So this is an index. So array start with the 0 index, right? So let's say what happens, save it, right? And then we're gonna do ID and 1, right? It got the first, right? Now, if you're after the ID, you can always do the ID, right? Let's clear it, right? Sorry. right? Because as I mentioned, that JavaScript is a case-sensitive language, right? All right, so that's done, right? And now we can also do the data list. For console.log, we can also access the child list, right? So child list, and you can use the ID. Let's say I wanted to access the ID. First one, I wanted to access this one, this information, right? Pete. So is it possible? Absolutely. So let's say with this one, if it works, right? So I got a Pete information. So let's say I'm only interested into name, to get the name, right? And then we get this, and then okay, so there you are. So we got the information what we wanted, right? So this is pretty much we gonna talk about an object today. Now I want to talk about an important concept: inheritance and prototype chain, right? So if you're someone who came from, as I mentioned, right, from a C++ or a Java or a C# or an Apex language, right? So it's a bit confusing, right? JavaScript. I can understand that because we do not have a class implementation as per the class, right? Although class keyword is introduced in ES 2015, but it's a sugar-coated syntax, right? But it still remained prototype based, right? So when it comes to inheritance, right, JavaScript has only one construct, that's objects, right? Each object has a private property, which hold a link to another object called as prototype, right? That's exactly what I'm going to demonstrate now. The prototype object, right, has a prototype of its own. So until an object is reached with null as its prototype, right? By definition, null has no prototype and act as a final link in this prototype chain, right? So if you look at all the objects in JavaScript, right, there are instances of an object which sits on top of prototype chain. So I know that is confusing, right? It's just, kind of stuff, right? So I'm gonna demonstrate just to give you an idea, right? So remember I talked about the functions before, right? So we're gonna get into functions here, just to give you an idea. So we have let method equals to let's per equal to function person. Let's say okay, forget about the person. So we can do name, right? Name, age, right? And then we have this dot name equals to name, right? This dot age this dot age equals to age, right? Nice and easy, right? I hope you understand what I'm trying to do, right? I'm creating a function, assigning it to a variable. So okay, now, so what we're gonna do, so you can do so if you do something like this, right? Let obj equals to new per, right? So we have, right, Dave, you know this what I'm doing, right? So we done that already. So 20, right? So this is pretty much the same what we did, the first thing, right? Okay, now, so what happens, right? So we have, we wanted to introduce another variable, right? So how do you do that? So let's say per dot okay, just a second. Prototype. So you can say add properties in a function. Let's add property phone, right, equals to, right, okay. Now console.log per, let's see what happens. You see, it's gonna fail. right? Because okay, so what we're gonna do, okay, so per dot phone. Can we access the phone here? Undefined, right? So that's because it's okay. Let's get into something else, right? So what we're gonna do, so we're gonna deal with something different in this case. So you see, what happens is that we actually did something wrong. Okay. It's not the way to do that here, right? So we're gonna do let per one equals to new per, right? So we're gonna do Dave. Okay, and it's gonna do, okay, just gonna do 25, right? And console.log. Okay, per one should work, right? Okay, right. Now, you see, because what happened is, right, I've added a property using a prototype, right? So I've used the prototype for a feature of it, and I have assigned I've added a properties, right, in this specific function prototype, and then I created an object, and then I try to access it, right? So I could able to access it, right? So this is pretty straightforward to do that. Now let's say I'm gonna do per dot prototype person name, age, phone, let's say city, right? So I'm gonna put city. Let's say I'm gonna put city as Sydney, right? Or you can put whatever you want, right? You can so put person one dot city, right? See, it shows up in intelligence, right? So you see, it's pretty cool, right? Now, what we're gonna do the same in terms of a meta, right? So let's do with the meta, right? And let's see what happens, if it's actually works or if not works, or if it's, so, right, okay. So what we're gonna do, so we're gonna do per dot prototype dot display function, right? Right. Oh, come on. Oh man, that's okay. Right, it's gonna do return this dot name plus let's say this. I mean, I'm just come on, this dot h, right, plus all right, this, come on, this dot city, right, and save it. So we're gonna do console.log. Come on, I don't think so that's gonna work. Okay, maybe it works. Per one dot display. Yep. Okay, so come on. Right, so as I mentioned, right, so you can add properties to it, you can add methods to it, right, using prototype, right? So what I did, I have a function, right? So I'm gonna explain it one by one. So I created a function here. This is nice and easy function, and assign it to variable per, right? And so it's becoming an object, right? Obviously, function returns an object. So now I created a instance of its an object. So I created a new object called per1, right? Now I've used the product type chaining to add two properties called phone and city here, right? So using this this specific function object. So person.prototype per.prototype the phone. Now I've instantiated this per, right, using per1. So I've used per1.phone, right, and which you can see here, and per1.city. Now in the same way, I've decided to, instead of using this phone and city, right, decided to encapsulate it in a method, in a function, right? So I've created a function using the same prototype, right, and then I've used the fields, the two fields which has already been defined, right, and an extra one which I have defined using prototype, right, chaining. So and then I've used using this, pretty much simple, right, as usual, the way we use to write function. And that's pretty much I've done. And then I've used the display, right? I know that it sounds a bit confusing. My apologies for that. So this is how it works, right? So this is very handy if you wanted to extend the function, if you wanted to do other stuff with it, right? So you can do that, and you can encapsulate it using method. Very nice and simple feature, right? So yeah, I mean, so let me recap what we've done, right? So we talked about the functions, right? And we talked about nested functions, right? You can go deep nested, right? You can go function inside, right? Then we talked about objects, right? We talked about setters and getters, right? Setters and getters are very handy and very good way, in my opinion, to access and put the information, right? Because to ensure the data quality, right? And then we talked about objects having fields with an array type, which contains array of an objects, right? And I demonstrated how to retrieve based on index, right? And then we talked about inheritance and prototype chaining, right? And I've given you a demonstration how to do that prototype chaining, right? It's pretty easy, pretty simple, very simple option to do that. So next time we're going to talk about the sugar-coated keyword classes, right? And to give you what classes are all about, how it's different from a regular object-oriented programming language, right? And it will be exciting. So I won't be covering more than 3 or 4 chapters of JavaScript, because I'm not doing extensive deep dive into JavaScript. This is an introductory course, right? Just to get you started. If you're someone who's aspiring to be a React developer or a Vue developer, or front end or back end, right? You can, or a Node developer, right? So you need to know JavaScript, right? JavaScript is very essential. It's a foundation language, right, to do any web development. So you need to know HTML very well. You need to know CSS very well. JavaScript. These are the 3 building blocks of web development, right? Then you can go in and learn React, different Angular, JS, all the frameworks out there, right? It will make your life much easier. Right. Okay. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. So I hope you find some value out of today's session. Please leave your message and comment if you have any questions, right? I'll try to answer whenever I get time, right? So that being said, adios and greetings from New Zealand.